Once your baby arrives, it's going to be a bloody nightmare trying to travel the world and top up that tan. So it's time to squeeze in one more adventure before you have that even bigger adventure that cries a lot and poos itself. You may have heard of the term baby moon, which sounds a lot like your unborn child getting its arse out, but actually refers to one last getaway for you and your partner before the baby arrives. We've just got back from our Babymoon to Lisbon, so today I want to talk to you a little bit about the things we learned during our trip, some things you definitely want to consider before booking somewhere yourself, and an honest review of Lisbon as a Babymoon destination. Hi, I'm Ben, and on this channel I share my personal journey as an upcoming first-time dad, along with the tips, advice and learning I'm picking up along the way, so that ultimately you do a better job of it than I do. Now your first question might be, is it safe for your pregnant partner to travel? The good news is the NHS advised that with the proper precautions such as travel insurance, most women can travel well into their pregnancy. Result. Timing is everything though, particularly if you're looking to book somewhere abroad. During those first 12 weeks of pregnancy, your other half isn't likely to be a barrel of fun due to the morning sickness, the feeling tired, and of course there's the increased risk of miscarriages. While travelling in the final months of pregnancy can be tiring and uncomfortable, probably for her as well. With this in mind, many people find the sweet spot to travel or take a holiday is during the second trimester in the middle of the pregnancy between around 4 and 6 months. Lauren's just hit the 21-week mark, so now seemed like a good time for us. Of course, if you're baby mooning in the UK, you can easily get to the hospital in a pinch or get yourself home quickly, so you've got much more room for manoeuvre. Before you go, it's a really good idea to take your partner's maternity medical records with you, just in case you need to give them to a doctor in an emergency. If you're going abroad, get travel insurance and make sure it covers you for pregnancy-related medical care, for things like labour, premature birth, and getting you a new flight home if you need it. Obviously, if you end up going away in the second trimester, that's hopefully pretty unlikely to happen, but it's definitely not worth running the risk of getting caught out. Now, the fun bit, where? Although this is a perfect opportunity to choose somewhere you've always wanted to go, there are a few things you probably need to consider before choosing your destination. Are the healthcare facilities decent if you need them? Or do they look like they've come from the set of Jurassic Park? Are things like malaria or Zika virus an issue? It's probably prudent to minimise the risk of your child having 3 heads if you can help it. Do you need vaccines, as some vaccines aren't recommended during pregnancy? When she joked about wanting to go viral, tropical disease was not what she meant. How are the food hygiene standards and is the water safe to drink? Most medications for issues like diarrhea aren't suitable during pregnancy, so it's best to avoid that situation unless you enjoy hell on earth. Flight times. The NHS advised that pregnant women are at a higher risk, albeit still small, of deep vein thrombosis or DVT. And that gets worse when you go on longer haul flights, so more than 4 hours, due to the increased periods of sitting still with no movement. Given the above, you might want to consider staying in Europe, but hey, you're an adult, you can make your own informed decisions. If you do end up flying, make sure your partner drinks plenty of water and that she's moving around regularly, ideally every 30 minutes or so. Lauren also wore compression socks, which although they're a pain to get on and off, are also meant to make quite a big difference. These particular socks are very stylish with little sharks on them, fresh off the catwalks of Milan. We ultimately decided on Lisbon as our Babymoon destination, partly for the reasons I've just mentioned, but also because it's meant to be a pretty cool city and we had lots of good recommendations from our friends. So, how was it, you ask? I've marked Lisbon on a few different Babymoon related categories and then given you my overall score and verdict. So here goes. The general vibe. So our first impression was actually not good. After getting into the city from the airport, we had a few hours to kill before we could check in. So we went for a little wander around the city and ended up in the sort of southeast of the city, near the cruise terminal and an area called Martin Monitz. It felt really seedy, and I'm not exaggerating when I say I got offered hash or coke about 73 times in 10 minutes. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, but it was a lot. Thankfully, I think we just picked the worst part of Lisbon to start our trip off with, as the rest of the city felt a lot safer and was genuinely really beautiful. Now, most of the city isn't actually on the coast. It's in fact on the River Tagus, but the river is so wide, you feel like you're on the sea. You can easily get a taxi or a train or a ferry ride to proper beaches if that's the vibe that you're looking for. Fun fact, the city of Lisbon is actually based around 7 hills, so there's a lot going on vertically, and there's loads of these incredible vistas and viewpoints which are known as miradors. Whichever ones you choose, the views are really, really stunning. There are rows and rows of pretty coloured houses all over the place, and the city is famed for its ceramic tiles that decorate a lot of the buildings. And then on top of that, you've got this really cool wall art and murals dotted around, and loads of those beautiful central plazas that European cities seem to do so well. In the more commercial areas, you've got tables out on the terraces, you've got street performers, and that generally cool Mediterranean vibe. So that was all really positive and enjoyable. Now, I've already mentioned that timing is everything, and that actually had a really large impact on our trip. We went over February half term, and although the main tourist areas had things going on, other parts of the city were dead. And this was, of course, a double-edged sword. You didn't have to queue for much, it was easy to get tables in restaurants, but also a lot of places were shut and there wasn't a lot of atmosphere. I've never noticed low season having such a dramatic impact in what is essentially a city break. The weather was a bit hit and miss during our trip, which I think is reasonable to expect during February half term. It was extremely windy, especially at higher points. But when the sun was out, it was genuinely toasty. It got up to 20 degrees, which after a long, cold British winter felt like bloody bliss. And it even gave me the opportunity to crack out the shorts and get the legs out. Top tip, pregnant skin reacts differently to non-pregnant skin when it comes to the sun, so make sure your partner's on it with the sun cream. Non-pregnant skin? Is that a thing? Overall, I scored the vibe 7 out of 10, although I think that number probably would have been a lot higher if we'd gone in the summer. Getting around. So one of the great things about Lisbon is that apart from the Belém neighbourhood out to the west, everything's pretty compact, so you're never too far away from anything. On top of that, the public transport system was clear, simple and easy to use. There were plenty of buses, an easy to follow metro system, and there's tuk-tuks bloody everywhere. Trams are a massive part of Lisbon's identity. I'll talk a little bit more about one in particular in a second, although we did notice that Lauren's now pregnant arse was too big to get in some of them. City Navigants card, which is a bit like an Oyster card. It can be used to get around on the bus, on the metro, on the tram, and it's really cheap. I think almost every journey we took was €1.80, and that included getting to and from the airport, which was amazing. However, if you're anything like us, we like to do a bit of exploring on foot, and this is where our challenges started. Lisbon is hilly. We knew that before we went, but I think we underestimated this, to be honest. Lauren did really well generally, but by her own admission, she was really slow on some of those steeper gradients. She said it was the first time she felt pregnant in the sense of not being able to do what she's used to being able to do. And then there's the narrow cobbled streets, which are undoubtedly charming, but not ideal for swollen ankles. And because that wasn't treacherous enough in itself, there was also slippy moss on the tiles in places. And just to complete the trifecta, there were also areas where the tiles were just missing entirely. Honestly, British Health and Safety would be having an absolute field day out there. We found there were lots of places to sit down, so a big prego tick for that one, but public toilets felt very few and far between, which is not ideal when your partner needs to urinate every 45 seconds. Some top tips for getting around with your pregnant partner on pretty much any city break. Make sure you've got enough 50-cent coins or the equivalent in any other non-Eurozone country, just to make sure you can actually get in the toilets. Make sure your pregnant partner stays hydrated and keeps snacks handy for those little energy boosts when she might need them. Make sure your partner has comfy shoes rather than just nice or fashionable shoes. She'll thank you for it later. I may have forgotten that reminder. So scores for getting around have actually split into two. I've gone for 9 out of 10 on public transport, but only 4 out of 10 on foot because of the hills and the cobbles. Things to do with a pregnant person. I caveat this section as with a pregnant person because obviously we weren't going out doing shots out of belly buttons in Portuguese nightclubs or tombstoning off the docks into the river. So our favourite experience was taking the historic Tram 28, which is actually a working commuter route but is extremely popular with tourists as it covers off nearly all of the major sites around the city. Now this is particularly handy from a pregnancy point of view, as not only does it give you a number of really good vantage points as you go up and down the various hills around the city, but more importantly it also saves those tired pregnant legs. If you do go, get to one of the terminals early to beat the queues as they can be absolutely mental. On top of one of the hills is the Castelo de São Jorge, or in English the Castle of St George. It's another place that was a bit of a mission to get up to, but it offered some great views over the city, as well as some fascinating history of both the castle and of Lisbon itself. This is all starting to feel a little bit highbrow, so here's a nice video of a female statue's bottom just to bring it back down a bit. Back at sea level, Lisbon has its main commercial square, which is very pretty and contains a couple of monuments for you to gawp at, and there's also an assortment of bars, restaurants and museums around the outside. There's also a rusty old elevator called the Santa just a lift that people get very excited about and queue for hours for? Do yourself a favour and find your way around the side of the Carmo Convent, which is a roofless church and well worth a view in itself, because from there you can actually access the exit of the lift and see those views free of charge. You can then invest those savings into a pack of nappies. Alternatively, there's a little cafe up the top there from which you can order a beer, and considering they pump out some feel-good music, it actually feels more like a rooftop bar. There was also the Time Out Market, which reminded us a little bit of Box Park in London, if you've ever been there. It's basically a warehouse with different food places all around the outside, and if you can name it, they've probably got it. We went on the Friday afternoon and actually found there were a lot of stag and hen do's getting on it. I actually got a little bit jealous. We actually ended up having some croquettes and they were absolutely banging. The drawback was it did take us about 15 minutes to try and find a seat anywhere, so I'd recommend trying to plan your visit so you're not going on a weekend if you can help it. More generally, we marvelled at the hand-decorated tiles, or at least try to. I guess we're just not that cultured. There was an area called Pink Street which came alive at night with terraces, bars and clubs. There are also a number of cute, windy and narrow lanes in neighbourhoods like Alfama and Bairro Alto, including the view you've probably seen on all of the guidebooks, and also the Porter 6 wine bottle. The only place that wasn't in easy distance but still well worth a visit was a neighbourhood called Belém. The monastery there is an unbelievable building. It's well worth spending the €12 to go up to the cloisters because there were some mega views. It felt very historic and very fancy. I may have got a little bit overexcited at certain points around the building. You should also factor in walking along the waterfront to Belém Tower, which was also stunning, but there was a 2-hour wait to get in, and let's face it, ain't nobody got time for that. Generally, there was a good amount to see and do for the 4 days that we were there, but I think if we'd been there any longer, we would have been twiddling our thumbs a little bit. Things to do, I scored 8 out of 10. Eating and drinking. Now, Lisbon's most viral food offering is the pastel de nata, or Portuguese custard tart. I really enjoyed these, but definitely not as much as Lauren did. You are what you eat, I suppose. It's a tart joke. Sorry. These had a creme brulee style caramelised top and were enjoyed with a little bit of icing sugar and cinnamon, and they were bloody delish. The other thing we saw everywhere was bacalhau, or salted cod, and thankfully again that was pregnancy friendly, and in the end we enjoyed it as a codfish cake with cheese in the middle, which I'm almost certain is exclusively aimed at tourists and would be sacrilegious to the locals. Now, beyond the pastries and the codfish, Portugal's well known for its wine, its seafood, its mixed meats and its soft cheeses, many of which were not suitable for a woman during pregnancy. While this wasn't a trip buster, it was a bit of a shame, and we did wonder whether it would have been better to come back at a different time when Lauren could have actually enjoyed those things. On the positive side, we went out for 3 different dinners while we were there, and they were all very different, but all absolutely delicious. On our first night, we booked a place called Linda e Lisboa, which had a modern Portuguese menu. We got a bit dressed up, we both wore red, her because it was Valentine's Day and the colour of love, me because it's the colour of my beloved Middlesbrough FC. We shared an oxtail risotto and a traditional dish of slow roasted pork jaw with sweet potato puree and sultanas. It takes a very special kind of establishment to make me eat in the animal's face and dried fruit in the same meal, but fair play to them, they did it. We went to an all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue called Hello Seoul, and that actually turned out to be a stroke of genius because since being pregnant, Lauren is understandably concerned about how restaurants cook her meat. This place allowed us to cook the meat ourselves so we could be certain it was cooked thoroughly for her, but I could still enjoy it a little bit pink. And more generally, this was great for me too because at the end of the day, it's plates of meat. Our last night we found a place on TripAdvisor called Lisbon 2 and Oo. Really quirky little place serving home-style food where guests had written comments over pretty much every inch of the restaurant, including the air conditioning units. I'm pretty sure it was a family business with the owner serving us, and we had a couple of traditional pork and chicken dishes with potatoes that were absolutely delicious. Even with drinks included, it came to €40, so it was amazing to have something a little bit more affordable towards the end of the trip when our wallets needed it. You may have picked up I enjoyed a little bit of booze over the 4 days. While it's not recommended for your pregnant partner, beer is actually full of vitamins B6 and B12, so getting your 5 a day is essential to making sure you're in tip-top shape for your partner. Not medical advice. I mean, if your partner gets to eat for 2, you get to drink for 2, right? In all seriousness, I did feel a little bit harsh getting merry while I knew Lauren couldn't, but luckily for me, she actively encouraged it. I guess the payout on the life insurance must be pretty good. Although I had a great time eating and drinking, there were definitely some drawbacks for Lauren, so I'm going to score this one as 8 out of 10. Affordability. Now, this was another key reason why we ended up choosing Lisbon as a destination. We shopped about on Skyscanner and we managed to find flights with BA from Heathrow with really good flight times, and the tickets were only about £100 each return. But the real winner for us is that we got an absolute bargain on our accommodation. We stayed in a place called the Seven Hotel, and while it wasn't the Ritz, it was a really solid 3-star hotel near the commercial area. And although the room itself wasn't huge, it was more than good enough for a few nights away. And we ended up paying less than £40 a night, which is insane in this day and age, although I'm sure the price shoots up during the high season. It was perfect for what we needed, and if that wasn't good enough, we actually found out the hotel had a wine machine in the lobby, which I dutifully abused. Nice. Probably an obvious one, but don't underestimate the importance of having a central location for your accommodation so you can easily pop back and take a quick breather if you need it. I know Lauren did. In terms of spending while we were there, well, our dinners ranged quite drastically in price. Our Valentine's meal cost us over €100, whereas our last dinner was about €40, so there's definitely a range of options out there. Don't know why that was also high-pitched. We didn't really spend much on attractions. I think the castle was €15, the monastery was €12, most of the viewpoints, etc. were free, and public transport was obviously really cheap too. All in all, I found Lisbon to be a little bit cheaper than most European cities, but not by an insane amount. Affordability, I've gone 8 out of 10. My overall recommendation? Well, overall, we had a really enjoyable Babymoon in Lisbon, but I think it's fair to say I'd properly broken Lauren by the end of the trip from the amount of hills and the amount of walking. So taking everything into consideration, my overall score is a very respectable 8 out of 10. Lisbon has a hell of a lot going for it as a city, but thinking specifically as a Babymoon destination, I can't help but feel like there might be a couple of slightly better alternatives out there, thinking of places like Paris or Nice or Venice, and that's just specifically in the city break category. It might be that you're looking for something a lot more relaxing, beach-style holiday, in which case you might fancy one of the Greek islands or the Algarve or somewhere like that. I'd love to know where you'd recommend as a Babymoon destination, in which case let me know in the comments below. In the next video, I'm going to be bringing you the best of the baby show from XL London, which is the biggest pregnancy and baby event in the UK. So why not take 10 seconds to quickly subscribe to this channel and keep up to date with the latest baby information as I drop it. As always, thanks for watching.